The ultrasound room was cold, but I barely noticed. A giddy, bubbling warmth had taken root in my chest and spread through my entire body, a private little sun glowing just for me. My hand rested on my stomach, a gentle, protective gesture over the slight curve that was still more secret than statement. 20 weeks. We were halfway there. I watched the grainy black and white image on the monitor, my heart thrumming in time with the rhythmic whoosh of our babies. Mark, my husband, was supposed to be here. A last-minute conference call for his architecture firm had pulled him away, but his last text was still bright in my mind. Get every detail, Clara. I want to know if we're buying pink or blue. I love you. He had no idea the surprise wasn't the gender, but that I'd already bought a tiny, gender-neutral onesie with little foxes on it, tucked away in my purse to give him tonight over dinner. Dr. Evans, a kind man with silver hair and a perpetually gentle smile, moved the transducer across my belly. Everything looks perfect, he murmured, his voice a soothing rumble. Strong heartbeat, good growth, right on track. He paused, squinting at the screen. Ah, there we go. Want to know the gender? Yes, please, I breathed, my fingers tightening on the thin paper sheet covering me. My phone was ready. I was going to text Mark the second I knew. I pictured his face lighting up, his deep brown eyes crinkling at the corners, the way they did when he was truly happy. Well? Dr. Evans said, a soft chuckle in his voice. It looks like you and your husband are going to have your hands full with two little ones. It's a girl. My mind snagged on his words. Two? Wait, what? Two ? I asked, a confused laugh bubbling up. Are you saying it's twins? Dr. Evans looked up from the screen, his brow furrowed in confusion. No, just the one. A healthy baby girl. He pointed to the monitor. See? Right there. He paused, his expression shifting as he replayed my question in his head. His eyes widened slightly. Oh dear. I'm sorry, Mrs. Allen. I must have mixed up my charts for a moment. You're my second Allen for the day. It's just, your husband was here this morning with his wife, and they're having a boy. I suppose I just had boys on the brain. The air in the room seemed to crystallize, becoming sharp and impossible to breathe. The private sun in my chest extinguished, replaced by a black hole of icy dread. I stared at him, my lips parted, but no sound came out. The rhythmic whoosh of my baby's heartbeat felt like a drum pounding out a funeral march. My husband? I finally whispered, the words tasting like ash. Mark Allen? Dr. Evans' face went pale, the kind grandfatherly expression melting into one of pure, unadulterated horror, as he finally understood the colossal mistake he'd just made. He looked from my face to the chart in his hand, then back to my face. He was here with a Mrs. Amelia Allen. I just assumed, with the same last name. His voice trailed off, thick with an apology that could never be big enough. Amelia Allen. The name was a phantom, a ghost I'd never heard of. And she was pregnant. And my husband, my Mark, the man who sent me heart emojis and talked about our future, had been here with her. This morning, while I was at home, carefully picking out an outfit that wouldn't be too tight on my growing belly, he was here, in this very building, looking at another grainy screen, hearing another heartbeat, with another woman who carried his name. The fox print onesie in my purse suddenly felt like it was made of lead. The doctor was still stammering apologies, his words blurring into a meaningless buzz. But I wasn't listening. I was looking at the monitor, at the flickering image of my daughter, and I felt the world, my world, the one I thought was so safe and warm, shatter into a million pieces. I don't remember leaving the clinic. I must have nodded, paid the copay, and walked to my car. But the memory is a blank slate, a stretch of erased tape between the cold dread of the ultrasound room and the moment I found myself parked on a quiet, tree-lined street I didn't recognize, with rain beginning to streak down the windshield. The rhythmic thump of the wipers felt like a taunt, marking time in a life that no longer made sense. My hands were clenched so tightly around the steering wheel, my knuckles were white. For a dizzying moment, I had the wild urge to call him, to scream into the phone, "Who is Amelia?" But the part of me that had just been shattered, The logical, trusting part was being replaced by something else, something colder and sharper. An instinct for survival. My mind raced backward, desperately searching for clues I had missed, for the fine cracks in the foundation of our perfect life. Mark was a good husband. He was more than good. He was the man everyone envied. He remembered my favorite flowers, made coffee for me every morning, and left little notes on the bathroom mirror. He was the one who insisted we buy our little craftsman house in the suburbs, with its big backyard perfect for a swing set. "For our future, Clara," he'd said, wrapping his arms around me on the day we got the keys. "For the family we're going to build right here." The business trips. My stomach clenched. They'd become more frequent over the last year. Trips to Seattle for a new high-rise project. Weekends in San Francisco to meet with investors. I never questioned them. Why would I? He was ambitious, driven, building a future for us. He'd always call, FaceTime from his hotel room, the background always impeccably generic. He'd tell me he missed me, that he couldn't wait to come home. Was Amelia with him on those trips? Was she just out of the frame, listening to him whisper the same sweet lies to me that he'd just whispered to her? I thought about last Christmas. He'd bought me a delicate sapphire necklace. "To match your eyes," he'd said, his voice soft as he fastened it around my neck. I'd worn it every day since. Now, the cool weight of it against my skin felt like a brand. Was it a guilt gift? The cool weight, a carefully calculated token to keep me happy? To keep me from looking too closely? My mind flashed to a conversation we'd had a few months ago. I'd mentioned opening a joint savings account specifically for the baby. He'd been strangely hesitant. "Let's wait a bit, honey," he'd said, brushing it off. "The market's a little unstable. I've got some investments I'm managing. It's safer for now." Safer for whom, Mark? I finally drove home, the short trip feeling like a cross-country trek. The house, our house, looked different, like a movie set I'd wandered onto by mistake. Every detail, from the rose bushes I'd planted by the porch to the welcome mat that read "The Allens," felt like a lie. I walked inside, the silence of the empty rooms pressing in on me. I couldn't stay here tonight. I couldn't sleep in the bed we shared, surrounded by the ghost of a man I didn't know. I grabbed an overnight bag, throwing in a change of clothes and my toothbrush, my movements robotic. But as I turned to leave, my eyes fell on the door to his home office. It was always neat, meticulously organized, just like him, and it was a room I rarely entered. He worked, and I respected his space, but respect was a currency I no longer had. The truth was in there somewhere. I was sure of it, and I wasn't going to run to a friend's house to cry. Not yet. First, I was going to find it. The door to Mark's office creaked softly as I pushed it open, a sound that seemed to echo the cracking of my own composure. The room smelled of him, a faint, clean scent of cedar and old books. It was a smell that used to mean comfort, safety. Now it felt like the lair of a stranger. The large oak desk was, as always, immaculate. A sleek laptop, a stack of architectural magazines, a single framed photo of us from our wedding day, smiling under a canopy of autumn leaves. I felt a wave of nausea so intense, I had to grip the back of his leather chair to steady myself. How could he look at that photo every day? How could he live inside this lie with such seamless, smiling grace? I started with the desk drawers. The top one held pens, paper clips, and sticky notes, all arranged in perfect, maddening order. The second held files, labeled with the names of his corporate clients. I flipped through them, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and adrenaline. What was I even looking for? A name? An address? A confession? It felt invasive, a violation of the trust I thought we shared, but that trust had already been detonated. I was just picking through the rubble. Nothing. It was all business, all professional. Of course it was. Mark was nothing if not careful. He wouldn't leave clues lying around in plain sight. I was about to give up, to retreat with my bag and my broken heart, when my eyes landed on the bookshelf. It was filled with heavy tomes on modernism, urban planning, and structural engineering, but on the bottom shelf, tucked behind a row of thick binders, was a small, unassuming black shoebox. It was the only thing in the room that felt out of place. My fingers trembled as I pulled it out. It wasn't heavy. I lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of tissue paper, was a second phone. A simple burner-style smartphone, not the high-end model he used for work. My breath hitched. I pressed the power button, praying it wouldn't be locked or dead. The screen flickered to life. No password. My thumb hovered over the message icon, then the photo gallery. I clicked on the messages first. The inbox was filled with texts from a single contact. A. My blood ran cold. I opened the thread, scrolling back weeks, months. A. The doctor's appointment is at 9 a.m. Don't be late this time. Love you. Mark. Wouldn't miss it for the world. Love you more. A. Can you pick up ginger ale? The morning sickness is brutal today. Mark. On my way, my love. Anything for you and our little guy. Our little guy. The words blurred through a sudden film of tears. He knew. He had been living this, sharing the small, intimate details of a pregnancy with her, while I was navigating my own nausea and exhaustion alone, thinking he was just busy with work. I scrolled further, my stomach twisting with every message. There were photos. Not many, but enough. A picture of a woman's hand, a delicate gold band on her ring finger holding his. A selfie of the two of them, cheeks pressed together, smiling in front of a fireplace. It was her, Amelia. She was beautiful, with dark, cascading hair and the kind of serene smile I felt I could never replicate. And then I saw the last thing in the box, beneath the phone, a folded piece of paper. It was a lease agreement, an apartment downtown, a chic address in the Pearl District. The lease was in his name, dated 1.5 years ago. But it was the co-tenant's name that made me drop the paper, as if it had burned my fingers. Amelia Allen. She wasn't just a girlfriend. She wasn't just a secret. She was his wife. He had two of us, 2 wives, 2 homes, 2 babies on the way. He hadn't just cheated on me. He had built an entire parallel life, a mirror image of the one we shared. And I had been living in the dark, a clueless, trusting fool in a house of cards he had built around me. For a long time, I just sat on the floor of his office, the lease agreement and the secret phone lying beside me like pieces of shrapnel from an explosion. The shock had subsided, replaced by a strange, chilling clarity. This wasn't a simple affair. This wasn't a mistake he'd made on a business trip. This was a calculated, long-term deception. Bigamy. The word echoed in the silent room. It was a crime. He had committed a crime against me, against her, against the state. He had built 2 separate, legally recognized lives. My mind, trained in the logic and order of my work as a data analyst, started to connect the dots. The separate finances he'd insisted on, the mail he sometimes had delivered to a P.O. box, claiming it was for client confidentiality. The way he was always so meticulous about his calendar, never double booking, never mixing up details. He wasn't just organized, he was compartmentalizing 2 entire existences. I stood up, my legs feeling steadier now. The grief was still there, a heavy weight in my chest, but it was being forged into something harder, something that felt like resolve. I went back to the desk, no longer looking for emotional clues, but for practical ones. Financials. That's where the real story would be. Tucked away in the bottom filing cabinet, in a folder simply marked Personal, I found it. Bank statements. In a folder not from our joint checking account, but from an account at a different bank, one I didn't recognize. The account was in his name only. I spread the papers across the desk, my eyes scanning the columns of debits and credits. The numbers told a story that was even more sickening than the text messages. There were monthly rent payments for the Pearl District apartment, payments to a different OB/GYN clinic from mine, charges from high-end baby stores, jewelry shops, and restaurants I'd never been to with him. He was funding this entire second life, and he was doing it with money from his firm. Money I had believed was going into our shared future, our savings, our life. But there was more. I saw a recurring transfer, a significant sum deposited into another account every month, an account under the name Amelia Price. Price! That must have been her maiden name. He was supporting her completely. And then, the transaction that made me physically recoil. A down payment. A wire transfer of $50,000 made 6 months ago to a real estate agency. The memo line read, Lake Oswego property, Allen. He wasn't just renting an apartment with her. He was buying a house, a family home, just like the one he'd bought with me. The sheer scale of the betrayal was breathtaking. He had woven a web so intricate, so vast, that I couldn't see how one man could possibly maintain it. He wasn't just a liar. He was a master architect of deceit. This wasn't about love or a midlife crisis. This was about control. About having everything. 2 wives, 2 homes, 2 children. He was playing God with our lives, and Amelia and I were just pawns in his elaborate game. Did she know about me? The lease said Amelia Allen. Had he married her legally too? Was our marriage even valid? A cold fury, pure and clean, washed over me. This was no longer just about a broken heart. It was about my future, my child's future, and the legal and financial mess he had deliberately created. I carefully photographed every single document with my phone. The lease, the bank statements, the wire transfer confirmation. I put everything back in the box, slid it behind the binders, and returned the office to its pristine, deceptive state. He would never know I had been here. He would never know I had found his other world. I walked out of the house, my overnight bag in hand, but I wasn't running away anymore. I was going to war. The drive to my sister's house was on autopilot. The city lights blurred into long streaks of color, and the radio played songs I didn't hear. When I arrived, Lisa opened the door, took one look at my face, and pulled me into an embrace without a word. I didn't cry. I was past tears. I felt hollowed out, scoured clean by the rage that had taken root where my heart used to be. In her quiet kitchen, over a cup of tea I couldn't drink, I laid it all out. The ultrasound, the other wife, the secret phone, the financial labyrinth. Lisa listened, her expression shifting from shock to disbelief to a hard, protective anger that mirrored my own. He did what? She finally breathed, her hand covering her mouth. Clara, this is insane. This is something you see in a movie. I have proof, I said, my voice flat. I showed her the photos on my phone. She scrolled through them, her eyes widening with each image. You need a lawyer, she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. Not just a good one. You need a shark. I know someone. Her name is Sarah Jenkins. She handled my friend's divorce, and she does not mess around. The next morning, I was sitting in Sarah Jenkins' office. It was a corner suite downtown with a view of the entire city, a landscape of glass and steel that suddenly felt like a battleground. Sarah was in her late 40s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a calm, commanding presence. She wore a tailored gray suit and an expression that suggested she had seen every form of human betrayal and was impressed by none of it. I told her the story again, this time with the cold precision of a witness giving a statement. I presented the evidence, the photos of the documents, the timeline of his trips, the discovery at the doctor's office. She didn't interrupt. She just listened, her pen occasionally scratching a note on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and steepled her fingers. Well, Mrs. Allen, she said, her voice even, this is certainly one for the books. What your husband has done is not only grounds for divorce on the basis of fraud, but it's also felony bigamy. The words spoken aloud in this sterile, professional space hit me with fresh force. So, our marriage? If he married her legally after you, your marriage is valid, and his to her is void. If he married you second, the reverse is true. We'll need to pull public records from both here and Clark County in Washington, assuming that's where they got the second license. But frankly, in a case like this, the court is not going to look favorably on him regardless. He has built a fraudulent enterprise with you and this other woman as his unwilling investors. She laid out a plan with chilling efficiency. First, a private investigator to confirm Amelia's status and get photographic evidence of them at their other home. Second, we would file for an emergency court order to freeze all assets, joint and personal. He's been funneling marital assets into a separate fraudulent household, she explained. We need to stop the bleeding immediately. I don't want to be vindictive, I whispered. the words feeling foolish even as I said them. I just want what's fair. For me and my daughter. Sarah gave me a look that was not unkind, but was utterly devoid of sentiment. Clara, fair, left the building the moment he signed a second marriage certificate. This isn't about vindictiveness. This is about protecting your child and securing your future from a man who has proven he is willing to systemically defraud you. He didn't just lie. He committed a federal crime. We are not playing nice. We are playing to win. Her words were a bracing slap of reality. She was right. The time for soft feelings was over. Mark had constructed this elaborate deception, and now I was going to deconstruct it, piece by painful piece. He thinks I'm at my sister's, devastated and confused, I said. He has no idea I know anything. Good, Sarah said, a small, grim smile touching her lips. Let him keep thinking that. The more comfortable he is, the harder he'll fall when we make our move. Go home, act normal, and wait for my call. I left her office feeling like I had shed a skin. I was no longer just a victim, I was a client. And we had a strategy. Going back to the house was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. The place that had once been my sanctuary now felt like a stage, and I was being forced to play a role I no longer believed in. I had to pretend to be the grieving, heartbroken wife, all while a cold, calculated fury simmered just beneath the surface. Mark was due back from his trip the next day. I had less than 24 hours to be alone with my thoughts in our shared space. That night, I couldn't sleep in our bed. I curled up on the couch in the living room, wrapped in a blanket, listening to the house settle around me. Every creak of the floorboards, every hum of the refrigerator seemed to mock me. This wasn't my home. It was just a property, one of two he managed. The next day, the private investigator Sarah had hired sent his first report. It was a single, devastating photograph. It showed the front of the Pearl District apartment building. Mark was walking out, his arm slung casually around Amelia's shoulders. She was visibly pregnant, her hand resting on her bump, a serene smile on her face. They looked like any other happy, expectant couple. The investigator's note was brief. Subject Mark Allen and Amelia Allen. Observed leaving the residence at 9:15 a.m. Appeared affectionate. Proceeding to follow to next location. Seeing them together, so normal, so domestic, sent a fresh wave of pain through me. It was one thing to see documents and texts. It was another to see the life he was living, in full color. I felt a pang of something ugly and unexpected. Pity for Amelia. Did she know? Was she another victim in his twisted fantasy? Or was she a willing accomplice? The gold band on her finger in the selfie suggested she believed she was his one and only wife. He was deceiving both of us. I needed to see it for myself. Not just a photo, but the reality. It was a reckless, impulsive idea, born of a desperate need to make the abstract concrete. Before I could talk myself out of it, I was in my car. The address from the lease agreement plugged into my GPS. The Pearl District was a world away from our quiet suburban neighborhood. It was all sleek glass towers, art galleries, and cafes buzzing with a trendy urban energy. I found the building, a modern high-rise with a polished lobby and a doorman. I parked across the street, my heart pounding in my throat. What was I doing here? What did I hope to achieve? I waited for nearly an hour, feeling like a stalker in my own life. Just as I was about to leave, convinced this was a pointless exercise in self-torture, I saw them. They walked out of the lobby, hand in hand. Mark was laughing at something she'd said, that deep, rumbling laugh that I used to think was reserved for me. Amelia looked up at him, her eyes full of adoration. They stopped at a cafe just down the street, sitting at an outdoor table. I watched from the sterile safety of my car as he reached across the table to brush a stray strand of hair from her face. I saw him lean in and kiss her, a soft, lingering kiss that was achingly familiar. They were a portrait of domestic bliss. They ordered coffees, shared a croissant, and talked with the easy intimacy of a couple deeply in love. He wasn't a man torn between two lives. He was a man effortlessly living both. There was no guilt in his posture, no conflict in his eyes. There was only a calm, terrifying confidence. That was the moment my last lingering shred of hope died. The part of me that secretly wished this was all a terrible misunderstanding, that there was an explanation that would make it all make sense, finally withered away. He wasn't a man who had made a mistake. He was a predator who had found a way to have everything, and the cost to the people he was destroying didn't seem to register at all. I put the car in drive and pulled away from the curb, my hands steady on the wheel. I didn't look back. I had seen everything I needed to see. The grief had finally burned away, leaving behind the cold, hard steel of certainty. Mark came home that evening, right on schedule. He walked through the door carrying a bouquet of my favorite lilies, a penitent look carefully arranged on his face. He was playing the part of the devoted husband returning to his worried, pregnant wife. The performance was so flawless it made my stomach turn. "Clara, honey, I'm so sorry," he said, pulling me into a hug. I let myself go limp in his arms, my body recoiling from his touch, even as I forced myself to endure it. "The conference ran late. I feel terrible I wasn't here for you." "It's okay," I murmured into his shoulder, my voice a carefully crafted whisper of disappointment and relief. "I was just worried." He pulled back, holding me at arm's length, his eyes full of feigned concern. "How are you? How's the baby? Did you find out the gender?" "A girl," I said, letting a small, watery smile touch my lips. "We're having a girl." "A girl," he repeated, his face breaking into a wide, genuine-looking grin. "That's wonderful! My little girl." He leaned in to kiss me, but I turned my head slightly so his lips landed on my cheek. He didn't seem to notice. He was too caught up in his own act. We went through the motions of a normal evening. He asked about my day, I asked about his conference. He talked about a keynote speaker, and I talked about the nursery colors I was considering. It felt like we were two actors in a play, reading lines from a script that only one of us knew was a complete fiction. The moment came after dinner. We were sitting in the living room when Sarah's text came through. "It's done. Assets are frozen. He's about to be served." I took a deep breath. It was time. "Mark," I said, my voice steady, all trace of the fragile, heartbroken wife gone. He looked up from his phone, a flicker of surprise in his eyes at my change in tone. "I know about Amelia," I said. The color drained from his face. He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing silently, like a fish out of water. The confident, charming facade crumbled in an instant, revealing the panicked, cornered man underneath. "What? What are you talking about?" he stammered, his eyes darting around the room as if looking for an escape route. "Amelia Allen," I said, savoring the name as it left my lips. "Or is it Amelia Price? I'm a little confused on that point. You see, I found the lease for your apartment in the Pearl District, the one you share with your other wife." He jumped to his feet. "Clara, you don't understand. It's not what you think." "Oh, I think it is," I said, standing to face him, my voice like ice. "I think it's a man who has 2 wives, 2 homes, and 2 babies on the way. I think it's a man who committed felony bigamy and has been funding his secret life with our money." I walked over to the coffee table and picked up my phone, swiping to the picture the P I had taken that morning. "You two looked so happy today, sharing a croissant. Tell me, does she know about me? Or is she just as clueless as I was?" He stared at the photo, his face a mask of horror. "How did you—" "You underestimated me, Mark. You thought I was just the quiet, trusting wife who would never question your business trips. You thought I would just sit here and wait for you." Just then, there was a sharp knock at the door. Mark's head whipped around, his eyes wide with terror. "What's that?" he whispered. "I believe that's for you," I said calmly. "It's a process server. He has our divorce papers and a court order freezing every single one of your assets. The house in Lake Oswego you were buying with Amelia? Consider that gone. The accounts you hid from me? Frozen. Your little architectural empire is about to come crashing down." He looked from the door to me, his expression a mixture of disbelief and pure rage. "You can't do this." "I already have," I said, stepping back as he started to move towards me. "You built this house of lies, Mark. I'm just the one holding the match. The knocking came again, louder this time, and as he stood there, trapped between the life he thought he could control and the truth that had finally come to collect, I felt no pity. I only felt the clean, sharp satisfaction of justice. 6 months later, I was sitting in the newly painted nursery, a soft sage green, assembling a crib. My belly was a perfect round globe, and my daughter kicked impatiently, as if she were eager to join the world I was so carefully building for her. The house was quiet. It was a different kind of quiet now, not the tense, waiting silence of before, but a deep, peaceful stillness. It was mine. The house, the quiet, the future, all of it. The divorce was as messy and brutal as Sarah had predicted, but we were relentless. Mark's life had imploded spectacularly. Faced with irrefutable evidence of bigamy and financial fraud, he had no choice but to settle. The court awarded me the house, our house, and a significant portion of the marital assets he had tried so hard to hide. His architecture firm was in turmoil, his reputation shattered. The last I heard, he and Amelia had broken up amidst the fallout. Her parents, apparently furious that their daughter had been duped into a fraudulent marriage, had swept in and taken her back home to California. I never found out if she knew about me beforehand, and I realized I didn't care. She was a ghost from a life that was no longer mine to analyze. Mark had tried to reach out a few times through his lawyer, offering pathetic, self-serving apologies. I never responded. His words were meaningless, just more bricks in the wall of lies he had built. Forgiveness was a currency I wasn't willing to spend on him. My peace was more valuable. My sister Lisa came over that afternoon, carrying a box of tiny, folded clothes. She helped me put the finishing touches on the crib, her presence a warm, steady comfort. "How are you feeling?" she asked, handing me a tiny pair of fox print socks. I smiled, holding them in my palm. "I feel free," I said, and the word was truer than any I had ever spoken. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm living my own life, not just a part in someone else's play. That evening, after Lisa left, I sat in the rocking chair in the nursery, my hand on my belly, and looked around the room. I had taken down all the photos of Mark, replacing them with landscapes I loved and prints of constellations. I was creating a new history here, one that started with me. I thought about the woman I was just a few months ago, the one who thought her world was ending in a cold ultrasound room. She was gone. In her place was someone I was still getting to know. Someone who had discovered a reserve of strength she never knew she possessed. The trauma hadn't vanished. It was a scar that I would always carry. But it no longer defined me. It was simply a part of my story, the chapter that taught me about my own resilience. It taught me that sometimes the deepest betrayals don't break you. They remake you. They burn away the parts of you that were too trusting, too willing to overlook the cracks, and leave behind something stronger, something tempered by fire. My daughter kicked again, a strong, insistent thump against my ribs. I laughed, a real, unburdened sound that filled the quiet room. I know, you're ready," I whispered to her. "So am I." I wasn't waiting for a man to complete my life, or for a fairy tale to come true. I was waiting for her. We were going to be our own family, a party of two, built not on lies, but on a foundation of unshakable, hard-won truth. And as the sun set, casting long golden shadows across the floor, I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that we were going to be just fine.